finished chapter 7 yesterday.
Like the beginning?
That's 13.
Yep.
What page number?
It's page 77. Okay, so yesterday we talked about suspense, correct? Johan? Yep. Okay, so someone, what is suspense? Raise your hand, okay?
Suspense is when you it's when the reader wants to read more about it.
Okay, when the reader wants to read more about it, yes?
It's when the audience is about to have a tense feeling of what about to happen.
Exactly. So, exactly. So an example of suspense on page 77 is where it says, as this was his a complete sentence in several days, I encouraged him. About what? So he just said, there's something that I didn't tell you. And she said, about what? And then Jim said, about that night. Now that's suspense because it leaves us as the audience hanging on the edge, right? And we want to read more. So that is how it's suspenseful. It leads up to, all of this is the rising action. It leads up to the climax, but it just leaves us on the edge. Do you see that? Now what is foreshadowing?
Well, somebody that's good but ends up turning they can end up being the bad person.
Exactly. So when someone, well, yes, that's an example, but what is the definition? Y'all know?
Which one?
William, go ahead.
Helps the reader develop expectations about upcoming events in the story.
Great. So it helps the reader to develop expectations about events in the story. So on page 83, actually, I'm sorry, page 82. Page 82. Is everyone there?
Yes.
Jim erased his name and wrote, Jim Finch, I signed. Page 83. Jim Louise Finch, Scout beneath it. Jim put the note in the envelope. So they just wrote a note, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next morning on the way to school, he ran ahead of me and stopped at the tree. Jim was facing me when he looked up and I saw him go stark white. Scout, I ran to him. Someone filled our knothole with cement. This is an example of foreshadowing and suspense, but foreshadowing because filling the knothole with cement leads to another event that's going to happen. So this foreshadows an event that will happen in the future, right?
Yes.
And then a suspense, why?
Because
we don't know who filled it up. So do we see the difference between the two?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want you all to make sure you know the difference between foreshadowing and suspense. In your groups, we already talked about it yesterday, but we are going to analyze the text for examples of suspense, okay? And the reason why we're doing this is this is going to be part of our summative grade that we don't know yet, but we're going to introduce it next week. But we're going to look for suspense in the story. It's going to help y'all be more critical while you read, helps you to analyze the text even better. So, in your partners, make sure you have 3 examples of suspense in chapter 7. I also want you to use the MLA format, so the in-text citation, where it's the author's last name, page number. Y'all understand how to do that? So, it's supposed to look like this. You've got your lead-in. So, Scout states, this is also in your notes, blah, blah, blah. Then the parentheses, Lee, which is the author's last name, page number, and then your punctuation at the end. Make sure it looks like that. I'll keep it on the board so that y'all be able to look at it. But make sure all of your quotes look like that, okay? That way I know that you know what you're doing. If you need help, let me know. Y'all go ahead and start working. I'll walk around, make sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. Got a piece of paper. Yes. Raise your hand if you need help. Or raise your hand if you just need a question about suspense. Question?
Read the ones that we found.
Yeah.
One. Listen up. Examples.
Do you need help?
No.
Do you need help? Huh? Do you need help? Y'all got it?
Page little. 483.
Okay, so let's go
I
back.
think it's, yeah.
This part that I
Wait.
just read, right? About that night. You never
Oh wait,
told
they
me
got a
anything.
note too.
And then Jim waved my words away as if it was banning that. So this whole part is suspense, right? How is this suspenseful though? How can you tell that this entire section is suspenseful? What is it doing? What is it making you as the
You
reader
need
want to do?
Know what happened, or like know how like they, it's kind of, has got a twist or something.
Right, so it's making you want to know what happened, want to read more, right? So whenever you're writing this, obviously you're not going to want to write the entire thing, but what are you going to use? What is the three dots called? What is that called? An ellipsis, right? So you can use that, so that you don't have to write the entire thing, but we know what you're talking about. So do you see how that is suspenseful?
Yeah.
Cool. And then here's another one. These are us. This whole section is suspense. It's up, like it's making you want to read more. And then it says Jim snatched them out. He's talking about, he's talking about those voodoo dolls, like the soap bars. Remember we talked about that? And then when he said these are us, that makes us think that whoever put these in here has been watching them. And that puts us on our toes, right? It is kind of creepy. So now you see how that is suspenseful. Okay. And then make sure you just don't get that confused with foreshadowing. Do you have any questions, Coleman? Okay. And then make sure you also write the in-text citation. Do you understand?
When someone's talking,
You just use the one instead of, see there's two there, you just use that one. Where are we at? Where are you looking at?
like he screams out, say but there's two there.
Okay, so you say,
Down there, please
so
stop
like
talking.
this. So you're gonna use one more. So you're gonna use these quotes, right? And then you'll say, Scout, I ran to him.
So there's two there. Here and three there.
That is one. And then there's two at the end. And then you're, and you don't need that. You see? And
His
just-
last name or the number go before?
It's just the number, it's a Lee and then no comma, just the number and then a punctuation at the end. The other ones are good. Those are good. Do you have any questions?
Would that cause
Yes. So what would that dash also?
like a pause?
Yeah, like a
Has to
pause.
say jump to the key.
So what are the three dots called? Ellipsis, right. So this acts like an ellipsis in a way. So it's like almost like she is being interrupted.
Oh, okay.
So that's what the dash is.
Okay, so-
And it's something else. And
So
then
that
it-
could be like two of the suspense.
Yeah, exactly. The dash works like an ellipsis in a way. It
Okay.
like makes, it's like a dramatic pause. It's like in something else.
Okay.
And the voice went black. And then it said, what? Shoot, when we get home, they've been sewed up. And then we know that when he says they've been sewed up, like he had done it,
Yeah.
that means it's the boy that did it. And so that automatically makes us as the reader think that it's true.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's how it's suspenseful.
Okay.
Are y'all good?